Today we're doing Rocky III, which came out in 1982. The film had cost $17 million. And take it away.
No, $17 million in 1982 was actually a decent-sized budget.
Nothing to sneeze at. And 99-minute movie.
Yeah, very tight. First movie was, kind of came out of nowhere. Became a very big hit. And then, obviously, because it was a big hit, they had to make a sequel, which was Rocky II, and that was also...
The first one Stallone wrote and directed.
Right.
I think he wrote the first one.
He wrote the first one, and...
then he would start directing
as he went on. I think he wrote all of the movies, and he directed, 4 of the 6 that he made?
I believe so.
I don't know how we want to count Creed into the continuity. I mean, I count them. I think they're part of the overall franchise.
Oh, absolutely.
I guess to just circle back around, so Stallone was a working actor throughout most of the early 70s, mostly, in low-budget films or really small parts in some fairly well-known films. Yeah. He was in Bananas.
Yeah, I was going to say, you see him, was it on the subway?
Yeah, he plays like a street tough. That was what he kind of played. That was sort of his speciality.
Yeah.
Like that, and then Prisoner of Second Avenue, I think he plays a very similar part. He was in a couple of Roger Corman films, and he did The Lords of Flatbush.
Yeah.
So he was a working actor, but he wasn't really getting anywhere because I guess he was sort of being kind of stereotyped into like just being like an Italian street tough.
Yeah, he would still, like, I remember him telling a story about how he auditioned for Star Wars, and he walked in and said, "Look, I pretty much know that I'm not what you're looking for."
Mm-hmm.
He did this, and it's kind of funny. He was around, and he's one of those actors, I think almost like when Chaz Palminteri wrote A Bronx Tale and did the Broadway show.
Very much like that.
It was kind of like, he had told the studios, "Look, I'll do this if I can star in this film."
Right.
And he was known, he wasn't a name. So I think it was somebody who literally, one of the producers literally mortgaged his house to make the first Rocky film.
Right.
And Stallone had actually mentioned that when he won the Golden Globe for Creed, like saying that I would have no career if they didn't take this chance on this character. And he's played this character for how long now? I mean,
it's 76 was the first movie. He wrote the movie Rocky for himself. He had gone to see like a closed circuit fight. I think it was one of the Ali fights.
Oh, is that?
Right, and that's kind of gave him the inspiration. So he wrote the movie, and he said that the condition for buying it was that he wanted to play Rocky.
Yes.
They offered him a lot of money to just sell them the script because they wanted James Caan. Which would have changed the movie a lot. Nothing against James Caan, great actor, but Stallone really wrote it for himself, and that's why I think it was so perfect when he was in the first Rocky, is that he was basically playing a character he wrote for himself. So he was really right into his strengths, and it was sort of the first movie where he really got to show some more dimension, even though he was still playing kind of an Italian street tough guy. I mean, but it was just a little bit different. The first Rocky is more of a romantic drama that happens to have boxing in it.
Yes.
And the second one, I would say, is also that. And then the third movie, the one we're primarily focusing on, is really the first one that's a boxing movie. There's not really any shading in the relationship between Rocky and Adrian at this point. They've already made whatever...
Yeah, and I remember
the growth that they needed to make.
Yeah, and I remember even Gene Siskel saying at the time, you don't really learn anything more about Rocky that you don't know already. I mean, if anything, this is when the franchise starts to become like a machine. I mean, because, we're talking about MTV, we're talking about, quick flashes, video stuff. When you get to the fourth movie, I mean, it's like, that movie is like almost one long video.
The fourth movie is especially formulaic.
But the third one seems to know what we love about Rocky. We have the characters, we have, we have Mickey, we have a really scary bad guy. Mr. T is really scary. Revisiting this film, and we were talking about it the other day, he is really a frightening bad guy, and you had made a point about...
Yes. Well, Mr. T, like the first two Rockies, the antagonist is Apollo Creed.
Played by Carl Weathers, who's wonderful. And it's multi-dimensional. It's not just, he's like a bad guy. I mean, he's taken from, kind of inspired by Muhammad Ali, right?
Yes, definitely. And in the first movie, and the second one especially, they kind of show a little bit more to him than just being the bad guy that's taunting Rocky back into the ring, especially in the second movie. Like, there's that nice scene in Rocky 2, very early on, where they're both in the hospital.
And he comes into the kind of like...
Yeah, and they have like a nice little moment. And it kind of helps because it sets up what happens in the third movie. But yeah, so Clubber Lang is the main bad guy in Rocky 3. He's the fighter. And he doesn't have any... There's never a moment in the movie where he's not hostile.
No.
Like, he's angry. Every line he says is pretty much an intimidating threat. There's not a scene where we get to see any other emotion from him at all. And I was wondering if that was by design, or if maybe it feels like maybe there should have been an extra scene in the movie where after Clubber Lang wins, we at least just see him dealing with the fact that he's now the heavyweight champion of the world. They never have that scene.
No.
And it's interesting, and it makes it more satisfying in a weird way because, you know, obviously we're not going to spoil the movie. Actually, we probably are. I don't want to spoil it, like Eddie Murphy talking about it. I don't want to spoil it, but Sly wins this one. But no, so Clubber Lang is just such an intimidating. It's almost like he's the shark in Jaws. There's nothing to him. He's just pure aggression and anger the whole movie.
Exactly.
And it makes him scary. And Stallone, as Rocky, even says at one point that he's genuinely afraid that he's going to have to fight this guy, that he might get killed.
Yeah, and you know, and it is frightening. And when you see Rocky for the first time, first of all, and even Burt Young's Paulie makes the comment, right? You got your face fixed. Well, he really did. You could definitely see obvious work on Stallone's face from the second to the third film. Also, there's this juxtaposition montage at the beginning where Clubber Lang is just hungry and he's beating all these guys because he wants a shot at the title, while we're showing Rocky with all these ads and all these advertisements. And you had mentioned, like, there's a picture of him and Reagan that you think is actually a real picture. And it's funny because a lot of people have made this point before, and I think it's a valid point, that when Stallone wrote 3, he was also kind of dealing with his fame.
Yeah.
You know, and you could see that. You could see that in the montage. You could see that in the products that he's pushing. You could just see the way he's moving and the confidence that he has. He's becoming I'm not saying he's becoming a little less Rocky, but there is kind of this marriage between Stallone and Rocky in the third film, where he's starting to come to terms with his success. And I think it was an interesting place for him to write Rocky from that point, because I think he had the real experience. And the film gives you pretty much everything you want in 99 minutes. I mean, it gives you the training montage. Bill Conti's music is fantastic, and I have to mention Bill Conti because the Flying High Now song and all that stuff, and down to the whole thing that we know is great. But I always love the Bill Conti thing for another reason, is that Bill Conti was also the guy who would conduct the musicians during the Oscars. And he famously interrupted, Lord forbid he interrupted, because she was going on forever, Julia Roberts' Oscar speech.
Right.
So she made a reference the next year. She's like, yes. She's like, yes, well, you know, you don't want to be interrupted by that Tom Conti. And that always made me laugh because Tom Conti is a British actor, and it wasn't...
Yes.
That just always made me laugh. That was a big tangent, I realized.
Yeah, we're talking about Rocky 3, though.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, I'm kidding. No, but I think you're onto something. I think Stallone was definitely, you know, there is definitely some autobiographical elements to the character.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think is kind of fascinating is if you look at Stallone's career, especially around the time of 1982, the only success he really had were in Rocky movies.
Yeah.
He made Rocky. That was sort of what launched him. But then, like, after that, he did, like, Fist and Paradise Alley, both bombed.
Yeah.
And then he did Rocky 2, hit. And then he made Victory and Nighthawks, and those both bombed. And so he had to keep coming back to Rocky, and then...
Which is a shame, because actually Victory and Nighthawks are good films.
They're not bad. None of those movies I just named are bad films, but nobody wanted to see him in anything but Rocky, apparently. No. And then till later in 1982, where he made First Blood, the original of the Rambo films. But then after that, another bomb, Rhinestone. And then by 85, he's back doing Rocky again.
Back doing Rocky.
If you look at Stallone's filmography, like, the big hits for him are only really the Rocky and
movies.
Rambo movies.
Yeah.
I mean, that's about all he had. Some of his other movies have done okay, but he's had a lot of bombs in there. But, so, yeah, this is the... I think if you adjust for inflation, I'm guessing it's either Rocky 2... I'm sorry, Rocky 3 or Rocky 4, that's his biggest hit by far.
They made some, you know, as it went on, each movie just made more and more money, and by the time they got to 3 had made so much money. I mean, what was the other big movie that year?
E.T. Yeah, Rocky 2, I keep saying Rocky 2 now. Rocky 3 came out in 1982. It was the summer of a bunch of huge movies. We talked about this during, when we talked about the Halloween 3, because 1982 was such a big year.
1982, Star Trek.
It was Star Trek 2. It was there was Megaforce. There was Tron. There was Blade Runner. There was Poltergeist. It was a very busy summer. Most of the movies bombed, but the two movies that really kind of stood out, and Star Trek 2 being one of them,
Yeah.
but the really big hits were E.T., which made like $300 million, which now is probably almost $1 billion.
It's almost $1 billion.
And Rocky 3. Those were the two big hits of that year, like the really big blockbuster movies. And I think it's because the audience got what they wanted. And to your point, the movie's very slick. It's very efficient. It's 99 minutes.
And there's not a wasted scene in the whole
not
movie.
a wasted scene.
It moves.
It's all plot, and there's not very much plot. It's basically Rocky is kind of losing his edge, and then he gets beaten up by Clubber Lang. Mickey gets he doesn't get killed. He dies.
No, but Clubber Lang pushes him, and throughout the movie that Mickey has some kind of a heart issue, and this is kind of
it's very subtle. They have Mickey kind of go like this. Oh, it's my heart every so often. So we know it's kind of neat how they like make it really subtle.
But we have to say, to his credit, at that point, Burgess Meredith had been acting for about 40 years. Really good, solid character actor. I mean, till the very end.
So basically, the movie is Rocky has kind of a crisis of conscience, and he gets his mojo back by the end of the movie. I mean, there's not much more to it. There's a fun fight at the beginning with Thunderlips.
Thunderlips,
played by Hulk Hogan. And it launched wrestling. So the modern day era of wrestling really became popular again after this. I mean, wrestling never went anywhere. It's been popular since the 50s with Gorgeous George.
Oh yeah.
But I'm pretty sure this movie is sort of what launched wrestling onto the big screen, because WrestleMania was only a little bit after this, which had in it Mr. T and Hulk Hogan. So there's definitely a connection there.
So they had set up everything so well.
$1 billion. Stallone should be getting a piece of WWE's franchise. Maybe for all I know he does, but he really was the person that kind of brought it around to. And of course, in this movie, wrestling is real. There's no way that this wrestling is staged. There's no in this movie. It's no, they just kind of went into the ring and did whatever.
Yeah, and Hulk Hogan says
that's how it works.
That's the name of the game,
right?
And it's kind of like something as outrageous. And to me, the most outrageous thing that happens in this movie is that little charity match, because when you find out that it's rigged at the end, you're like, okay, but it wasn't really rigged because they beat the hell out of each other.
Yeah.
And a lot of wrestling, to be fair to wrestlers, a lot of them you have to be in great physical shape.
They're really hurting each other, but it's not like but they know how to take a fall, so they're not like. The point is, they know what they're doing in advance. Yeah. So even if you're planning in advance that somebody's going to throw you through a table, you're still getting thrown through a table. Yeah. I mean, I'll defend wrestling on that. I'm not a big wrestling fan anymore, but
Superfly, Jimmy Snuka.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an Extreme Championship Wrestling guy from the '90s, so much respect. That had a really rough and right. Oh, we could talk about that all day.
Suck it.
We're not going to get off. We're not going to get off on a tangent with EC. But yeah, go watch some old ECW. It's the best.
But I mean, that is the funny part. Is a match like this would definitely be. Rocky and the character of Thunderlips would have arranged it in advance. Rocky wouldn't just show up and then realize, oh, this guy's going to kill me. I better fight back. It was kind of funny. And Hulk Hogan had said that he didn't. I mean, those guys. It really is amazing how much they beat the heck out of each other.
Right.
And it works. I was just listening to Hulk Hogan talk to some people on radio about that. He says Stallone. First of all, this is talk about a movie being efficient, being like a machine. Stallone got down to 2.6% body fat in that movie. They make a joke how he's 202 pounds. He was 152 pounds in that movie. He ate nothing but raw eggs every day, and had a piece of toast or whatever. He worked out like a monster months before the film, during the film. Hulk Hogan said during that scene where they're having this charity fight between the wrestler and the fighter that there's no stunt person there. It's Stallone doing everything. He said at one point he landed on Stallone's chest, almost broke his collarbone.
Yeah.
He said at one point Stallone spit blood out of his mouth and turned to him and said, hey, this is going to be a really good scene, whatever. Stallone, to his credit, and you had made this point when we were talking yesterday, the fights in the Rocky movies would have definitely been stopped after a round or two because they are that brutal. But during the scene between him and Hulk Hogan, that is a very athletic scene that only two people that were in phenomenal shape could even do. They said Stallone actually picks up Hulk Hogan at one point, and they were making the joke that his legs were really wobbly, but Stallone actually picked up Hulk Hogan, dropped him out of there. That happened. There was no stunt person. When he dropped, Stallone dropped down. When he they did all that, and I got to give them the credit because I don't think they would even let an actor now do all that just for insurance reasons or for anything?
No, it would be a lot more. They would probably have a stunt man and then CGI Stallone over him. But so there's the fun fight with Thunderlips. That's kind of the fun and games. It's never, we're not taking that fight very seriously.
No.
It's very much played for comedy. There's a fight like about the third of the way through the movie with the first fight with Clubber Lang, which is very short, very brutal. And then there's a fight at the end. I mean, again, it's basically, that's the movie. It's like it goes from the one fight to the next fight to the next fight with a couple of training montages.
Yeah.
But
and you know, there's this thing that I watched, and I wonder if this affected you. When Rocky is losing the first fight, they're doing the countdown, and then they're showing Mickey, and they were trying to give him CPR at the same time, and then say, "You're out," and you see Mickey. That's very effective. And the thing about that fight too is there's such a sense of dread when you watch that fight because you know what's going on with Mickey, and you feel like Rocky at that point, like he doesn't even want to be there. I mean, because he's so worried about Mickey. And two, that fight is so brutal when he pushes Rocky into the corner. When Clubber Lang pushes him into the corner, that's some brutal stuff. Like, that's when the fight started getting. You could go from 3 to 4 and say that the fights got really, really brutal. In 3, you see it, and Clubber Lang is such a formidable presence. I mean, that it's very effective.
They're effective scenes, but again, like if you ever watch an actual boxing match now, and boxing is not really as big as it used to be. It's
going to be mixed martial arts.
It's about the MMA stuff, but yeah. So it's most fights would end after the first 2 times somebody got punched in the face.
And if you see somebody like get dizzy for a second, they'd be like, "Okay, the fight's over." In this one, they'll just keep going.
There's never a fight in one of these movies where the fight ends because somebody stops it. Like even in Rocky IV, I think at one point Stallone's holding the towel before. And Apollo gets beat. Apollo actually gets beaten to death in Part 4, to be fair, and that should have happened after the first 2 fights. I mean, if you actually get punched in the head hard enough that it knocks you down or knocks you out, that's almost enough force to kill you. So it's in this movie. I don't know how many times Rocky gets punched in the head or Mr. T gets punched in the head, but it's a lot.
It's a lot, and it's crazy because I mean, what's kind of neat about this movie is that Rocky has to learn a whole different fighting style. And he learns it from Apollo Creed, who ends up training him.
And then Rocky ignores it by the end of the movie. So
and kind of goes.
It's one of those things I noticed not this most recent time, but the last time I watched it. I'm like, he goes through all this effort of learning all this way to fight, and then he just does his own strategy at the end of the movie anyway. So it's like, well, wait a second.
What exactly?
It's understood that obviously Apollo is getting him back to the Eye of the Tiger, which he says like 50 times, by taking him into a street gym where Rocky really was used to fighting back before he even fought Apollo the first time. So we get that sense of it, and so that's important to the film, but it ultimately doesn't factor into the fight at the end, because all Rocky does at the end is use the rope-a-dope that was from Muhammad Ali when he fought Foreman, where you just make the other guy, throw so many punches that he gets tired out, and then you can win.
Yeah. So he
basically stole Muhammad Ali's fighting strategy.
Yeah, and he pretty much, like you said, Rocky pretty much exactly. He did exactly what he wanted at the end. He listened to Apollo for probably about 2/3 of the fight.
Right.
And then and it was kind of neat. The way Paulie is used in this movie is kind of fun. When you see Paulie for the first time, of course, he's drunk and he's bitter again at Rocky, and then they show the fame, and I remember this like on Point Pleasant Boardwalk as a kid, the Rocky pinball machine.
Right.
You see Paulie get mad and throw his whatever he was drinking at it and break it. And I remember playing that. I remember people lining up to play that. There's a scene in the movie where you see a lot of like Rocky items and things like that. And it made me think of like the Rocky video game and all those other things. Like I remember that stuff growing up. It's kind of funny to see that. Was Stallone really making fun of that?
Right.
At the time.
Well, the movie has 2 pre-credit sequences. The Eye of the Tiger montage, which is what we're talking about, should have been where the credits were, but they're not. They don't play the credits over it, which I always thought was weird.
That is kind of weird, actually.
But yeah, so the opening of the movie, and it's important. The montage in the scene in the movie is important because it actually does show Rocky becoming kind of famous and Stallone becoming famous.
Yes.
As we said, there's the autobiographical touch to it, but I wonder how much of that stuff is for real and how much of it was just created for the movie. Like, the pinball machine's real,
yes,
but there was never a Rocky Crunch Punch candy bar, which I guess is supposed to be like the Reggie bar was.
Yes, oh my God.
When Reggie Jackson had his own candy.
He hit 3 home runs in one game. He was Mr. October. I still remember that commercial. Hey, if you remember WPIX, you had a great childhood. I'm just saying. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. But yeah, so I wonder how much of that stuff in the opening montage is actual Stallone stuff, and how much of it was created for the film. And I think it's about 50-50. But yeah, so the point being is that there's the pinball machine, and then after this movie, Rocky became infinitely more successful and more popular, and just this is the movie that really made him an icon, more so than the first two movies. And again, because it was just a very flashy, slick film. I mean, the first two movies are very kind of, I don't want to say that they're rough, but they have a roughness to them that is not in this movie. This movie is very slick.
Talia Shire has a really good scene on the beach where Rocky's just...
It's the only good scene she has.
Yeah, it really is. It's kind of the only scene of substance she has, and it's a good scene.
Where she kind of talks some sense into
Very
him.
effective.
It's kind of like the low point of the movie. And the movie follows a very classic, you have to have like the hero fall, and then he's at his low point, and then he gets back at the end, and it's very classically told in a weird way.
Yeah, and Rocky 3 definitely has some low points because Mickey's death is still very effective. Carl Weathers is really, really good in this film. We know Apollo Creed from the previous two films, but there's this funny little thing where he's like training Rocky, and he kind of has this little secret thing. He's like, when this is over, you're going to owe me a favor.
What favor?
Exactly.
He's the only person that can say he's in the Rocky franchise and the Star Wars franchise. I mean, Adrian gets to say she's in the Godfather franchise and the Rocky franchise. Stallone can say he's in the Rocky franchise and the Rambo franchise. So in the whole, I would say that this movie it's sort of the Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom of the series to me. It's my favorite of the movies in the Indiana Jones series is the Temple of Doom. Even though I don't think it's the best, I think Raiders is the best.
Yes.
I think Rocky 1 is still the best of the Rocky movies. But I think that if I was going to have the box set in front of me and I was going to watch one of the Rocky films for entertainment, I think I would pick 3 because again, it's just a purely entertaining film. It's not very deep.
But it hits all the right notes.
It's very satisfying. The humor works.
All the right emotion.
Yeah, it has some sad parts. It has some happy parts. It's a perfectly constructed film. It's no surprise that it caught the public's attention. And some of the great lines in it, you really can't. I wonder. I could just picture Stallone writing this movie when it gets to the part, like the most famous part of the movie, was during the rematch when Clubber Lang just goes, "Go bust you up," and Stallone just says,
"Go for it,"
which became like a huge line. It was like the "Make My Day" of the '80s. The two big lines were "Go for it" and "Make My Day." But I think we covered it.
Rocky 3, 1982, worth seeing, especially if you're a fan of the franchise. Very entertaining. It moves. It's a machine.
I agree.